It is WRAL Triangle and 2. Pat Welter and I couldn't meet in the flesh this week, but we still wanted to make sure we had a podcast. Welcome in. I'm Mark Bergin. He's Pat Welter. And Pat, UNC now won 2 in a row under head coach Bill Belichick. In the Tar Heels, if they win 2 of their last 3 games, will become bowl eligible. My question for you this morning is, will they do it?
No, would be my prediction. Not acknowledging it's not possible because they have improved steadily here since the Clemson game, and credit to Belichick, credit to the players, credit to all involved. But, you know, when fans push back at me because I am critical and still a bit negative after a 20-15 Stanford, I'm not being negative to be negative. I'm being negative because there are red flags in these performances that show me that when they play better competition, they are not going to win. You can't have 47 yards of offense to Stanford in the first half and think that that's a positive sign going forward. You can't be trailing at Syracuse, another one of the worst defenses in the ACC, at the half and think that's a positive sign going forward. So, yes, it is positive that they've won these games, but when you step back and look at who they beat and how bad these defenses were and how little offensive production they've had, we're going to really find out how much UNC has improved on both sides of the ball when they play some real teams here down the stretch in Wake, Duke, and UNC.
Yeah, the 3 in-state schools, and I think we're going to look back at this, Pat, where you look at the Cal game, you look at the Virginia game, and if the Tar Heels could have gotten one of those. But what this is, you know, you just wonder if that's going to end up costing the Tar Heels in the long run. This is shaping up, though. Final week of the season, say UNC has 5 wins at that point. NC State still needs to get to 6 wins to become bowl eligible. The Wolfpack themselves, like that's what we're shaping up for a slam bang finish in the finale of 2 in-state schools where it's like the moment you go beyond the state border of North Carolina, I'm not sure many people care given the disappointment with both of those teams this year. But that to me is what we're shaping up towards. But I'm with you in the sense where I think you can be really critical of the offense. I think the defense has played outstanding at times this year, really in the last 4 games. But offensively, it's the same narrative over and over and over again, Pat, whether it's you want to point to some of the struggles of Gio Lopez in moving the football. I think you have to ask yourself if Freddie Kitchens is going to be around next year, just because, look, there's still a lot of football to be played in these next 3 games, but to have the lack of you can't have a whole half of poor performance offensively and expect to beat some of the better teams. And that's why UNC will be an underdog, at least this weekend against Wake Forest.
Yeah, I mean, Bill Belichick has been adamant that Gio Lopez gives them the best chance to win. He has not made any indications of making any staff changes in season. You know, he's been coaching a long time. He knows what's best, right? At least he says he does. I think, you know, the way he's coached the last few years gives you reason to question some of his judgment. But as far as going forward, I don't know how you could go into next season and try to sell fans that things are going to be different if you brought back Freddie Kitchens, if you brought back Gio Lopez as your starter without at least somebody pushing him for the job. But this is a fascinating test case, right? Because we have Bill Belichick in his first year at UNC, and we contrast it with Jake Dickert at Wake Forest, who's in his first season at Wake Forest. Now, I was trying to find his salary. Wake's a private school. I actually couldn't find it. I'm sure it's out there reported somewhere. Dave Clawson made about $4.8 million in his final year, so about half of what Bill Belichick's making. So if we can assume it's somewhere around there, you got a coach getting paid half as much. You got a roster that's probably half as expensive. That's 6-3 right now. So I think it's an interesting example of, you know, Belichick's made, I don't know if I could say they're excuses, but reasons for why they haven't been as successful as people hoped in their first year, you know, coming from behind the 8 ball and the transfer portal, having to bring guys in the spring. Well, Jake Dickert had all those same scenarios with even more things hamstringing him at Wake Forest. So it's going to be an interesting battle there. And then you throw in the mix that, and you talked about this weeks ago, you projected, will Bill Belichick be in the mix for NFL jobs? And my stance at the time was like, no way, because the team was so awful. Why would any NFL team want to hire him if he was showing incompetency at the college level? When I was at least shown a degree of competency in the college game, and that Giants job is open. And Belichick denied those rumors yesterday, but didn't like completely close the door either.
To Belichick's credit, I would say he handled that question by WRAL's Brian Murphy about as well as he could have. And the reason I say that is this, is to anyone listening or watching to us, Pat, whenever a coach who is employed is asked about another job, publicly in a media availability, in a news conference setting, they're not going to say like, oh yeah, if the Giants job is available, I'm going to take it. I wouldn't say it's impossible that he is the next coach of the New York Giants, but I wouldn't say that it is likely.
Yeah, I mean, don't you think he could have pushed back a little bit more? Like, all he said was, I'm focused on Wake Forest, essentially. Like, he didn't say, I mean, I get it. Like, why would you, I guess it's a tough spot to be in, right? Because if you do completely shut the door on it, and then you happen to want to take the job later, you change your mind, or circumstances change, then that soundbite lives forever. So I can understand it, and I'm just kind of being a little facetious with it. But I do think it's at least worth mentioning that he didn't like completely vehemently rule it out, which you do see some coaches do.
I also think part of that too is the respect he has for the organization, where he won 2 Super Bowl titles as a defensive coordinator. So that's something else to keep in mind. But Pat, I get all of these odds that get sent to me from different odds makers, different books, and Belichick is on the list as, okay, who the next permanent head coach of the Giants is, but he is not very high on that list in terms of who some of the favorites are. So again, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I don't think it's very likely at this point. What I am going to be curious about too, though, Pat, is if there are other openings. I know like the Miami Dolphins are coming off a big win. If there are other NFL openings, if he will be in the rumor mill, if he'll be in the mix to say, could he go elsewhere in the NFL as well as more openings open up?
Yeah, I mean, I think he has to be in the mix, right? Because the NFL was a snow globe every single season. And essentially, as college football becomes more like the NFL, that's kind of what we're seeing in the college game too with coaches, where teams are just firing coaches with no real indication that they're necessarily going to get a better coach. They're just going to get a different coach. And when you're in the NFL and you're just basically hiring, like let's say Joe Brady, for example, who you really have no idea, at least from what like we've seen publicly, if he could be a successful NFL head coach. You just kind of like, well, he won that title with LSU and Joe Burrow. It's like, well, what about all the talent around that team? And then he's been, on these other teams, for years now behind the scenes in the NFL. And you're like, well, it's his time. He's ready. Let's just hope we strike gold. And then you have Bill Belichick just sitting out there and like, yes, did things end well in New England? No. Did things start well at UNC? No. But he won 6 Super Bowls, and it's Bill Belichick. Is that better than the unknown of some of these coordinators? And, that's what I thought originally was going to happen when the smoke came out with UNC, was that just in his original hiring process was like, oh, he's just using this as leverage to try to get his name back out there. But what we saw was there seemed to be borderline like collusion effort by the NFL to not hire this guy. And nobody knows him behind the scenes better than the NFL, right? Like, people talk, like, we know what we know. We know things behind the scenes about how things have been run at UNC that in some examples have been a little bit troubling. And, I'm sure the NFL circles know way more than you could even possibly imagine about how he's running NFL teams or how he is to deal with. And so much of his NFL downfall became about the level of control that he wanted. And, at UNC, he was given the complete keys to the castle. And we're currently living with the results, both good and bad. And yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how this shakes out both ways. Whether it's things go so well for Belichick in Chapel Hill to end the season that his name becomes a hot candidate for those reasons, or things go so poorly to end the season that he's just like, let me get out of here. Let me take one of these jobs if they're offered, because this clearly didn't work. And I think these 3 games at the end of the season are going to really write the book on Belichick for sure, because we have the terrible start through Clemson. We have this mid-season resurgence through the soft part of their schedule. And now we have the 3 in-state rivals to end it, who are all outside of Virginia, I would say, better than a lot of these teams that they've been playing better against.
Yeah, it's almost the double-edged sword of how well the Tar Heels expect to finish down the stretch, of whether that has any impact on Belichick's future. When I'm talking next season, Pat, of is he still in Chapel Hill or not? So then that's another thing too, is it's not just that, okay, is he interested in an NFL job? There has to be a team that wants him. In this last go-round, when he was on all these different shows and podcasts and everything, that wasn't the case to where any NFL team wanted him. It's the reason he's in Chapel Hill now. So we'll see. Wake Forest coming off a big win against Virginia as well. Robbie Ashford, the dual threat quarterback transfer from South Carolina. I would say try to keep him in the pocket and try to limit his mobility, because he's a dual threat. Actually has more interceptions thrown, 5 than touchdown passes thrown, 3, 4 rushing touchdowns. But they've got a running back in the backfield, Wake Forest, that it's going to be a big test for the UNC defense. Damon Claiborne. Belichick, before the reporter could even finish the question, called him outstanding. One of the other questions is, what do you like about his game? He said, everything. He's a problem. So it's going to be a test for this UNC defense. And this UNC defense, to its credit, has played well really in the last 4 games, Pat, to at least give the Tar Heels an opportunity to win games. Can you keep that going? And look, if they could win this game, if they could get bowl eligible, Pat, when you broke your report about a divided locker room and everything too, if they were to make a bowl game, I got to give credit where credit is due, because I didn't think that that would be the case at all. But again, coming off 2 straight wins, Syracuse, Stanford, 2 of the weaker teams in the ACC. So really these next 3 games against all 3 in-state schools, well, that's what's going to happen down the stretch, Pat, of which is it? Is it a team that is improving, like Belichick has said repeatedly in his media availabilities, or is it more of what we saw when they had lost several games in a row?
Yeah, total for this game, 38.5.
Whew.
And Wake Forest is more than equipped to play another staring contest with UNC like Stanford did, because they played some close games, some low-scoring games. The Virginia game was 16-9. The SMU game was 13-12. And I'd be expecting another one like that. This is going to be a battle, and it's going to come down to the turnovers and the mistakes. And, which of these quarterbacks in their single-digit touchdowns and Ashford and Gio Lopez can actually make a play.
Yeah, I saw this Wake Forest team play earlier this year against Georgia Tech. Almost beat the Yellow Jackets in overtime. So, I know there's a lot of UNC fans that, again, would love to have the Cal game back. Would love to have, what was the other one that was close, Pat? Help me out here.
Oh, it was the Virginia game.
Cal and Virginia. But the same can be said about Wake Forest as well, is what my point is. Pat, anything else before we move on here to NC State?
Bill Belichick, one of the most interesting quotes of the year. He's famous for just you never know what he's going to want to talk about. He gave me a 2-minute answer on day-to-day injuries. I asked about Thaddeus Dixon, and I just expected a 1-word answer, and he gave me 2 minutes on the thought process of day-to-day. I thought that was just kind of funny. But the reason I bring this up is because he gave a documentary's worth of an answer about World War II and how it globalized football and helped spread the ideas of the game nationally. Absolutely incredible. I encourage anyone to go back and listen to it on WRLSportsFan.com. It's towards the end of his press conference because it was Veterans Day this week. And, great little photo op. They unveiled a mural dedicated to former UNC football players and coaches that have served. And Bill Belichick's dad is among those who have served and coached at Carolina. And he told this story about how his dad, got into World War II shortly after his rookie season with the Detroit Lions, and just how like that World War II helped spread like offensive ideas around the country and change football forever. I mean, you want a documentary, you want a movie? That's it. So Bill Belichick, you never know what he's going to give you. Clearly, there still is a great football mind in there and a guy that has interesting things to say if you can just try it out.
It was a nice homage to all the veterans on Veterans Day. A classy move at UNC. All right, Pat. NC State looking for another upset on the road this weekend against Miami. And I thought this team was left for dead, and they pull off the upset against Georgia Tech at home last Saturday. Just when I think I have the Wolfpack figured out, I don't. And yet again, though, you're going to go on the road against Miami if you're NC State. 14.5-point underdogs. So, the Wolfpack have their work cut out for them. But the thing that really amazed me in the Georgia Tech upset is the Wolfpack did it without Hollywood Smothers and without Justin Joly, two of their best offensive players. We're recording this on Wednesday morning, so maybe by later in the week we'll have a better idea if those two players will go against Miami. Dave Doeren earlier this week with his media availability, not saying one way or another in terms of the injury status of his players.
Yeah, and that says a lot about NC State that they were able to perform as well offensively, play like maybe their best offensive game like ever under Dave Doeren. And you could argue in that Georgia Tech game, it was absolutely flawless. So let's see how they respond, because we're coming off before that game. The conversation was, is Dave Doeren going to retire? Is Dave Doeren going to get fired? And this win basically capped both of those conversations, at least for the moment. But yet I think still both of those conversations need to be had. And anything you've heard publicly from Dave Doeren still needs to be, I think, taken with a grain of salt, because all the reasons fans wanted him out, all the reasons he may have wanted to retire still remain. And the way they finish is going to go a long way to go with his future. It's the opposite coin of the Bill Belichick thing. It's, you have a coach that's been there 1 year and you're not sure if it's even worth investing in the future with Belichick. And now with Dave Doeren, it's a coach that you've had for too long, that it is good. The baseline is about as good as it's been at NC State. It's just a matter of like, well, do we just want to shake the snow globe up just to see what we can come up with here? But I mean, the Georgia Tech win arguably saved their season. A win over a ranked Miami team would make this season essentially a success. And then you cap that with winnable games versus Florida State and UNC, who I would certainly take them against right now. And this year could look a whole lot different, Mark. This year could go from disaster to one of Dave Doeren's better ones here in the blink of an eye.
Do you almost get the sense that every game matters, but like they go into that last game against UNC, and traditionally State has had tremendous success in recent history against the Tar Heels, where it's like, I'm not going to say these other games don't matter, but that's, we talk about this every week, Pat, where it's like, okay, what does Dave Doeren do? He does beat his rivals. It's almost like these other two games, I don't want to say they're totally irrelevant, because one more win gets NC State to bowl eligibility, but it's just like, that to me is really going to tell of like, do you want to keep Dave Doeren around or not? Is, can you beat UNC in the final week of the year? Am I crazy to kind of think that way? Or
no, you're not, because that's how fans think. And who's really running these programs? That's kind of the beauty and the downside of college sports, is fans have a major impact in how these programs are run and how decisions are made. And I don't just say fans, it's fans with money, right? Because yeah, the athletic director is quote unquote making these decisions, but the money people are pushing them one way or another. And these kind of games dictate how much money you're going to be able to pull out of these people, because it's all about momentum. It's all about how you feel. It's all about like almost like living out a fantasy team. Like that's in a lot of ways, that's kind of the way UNC is run, where like there's a lot of people involved in their decisions, and a lot of people that went to that school with a lot of passion and a lot of money. And, you know, they're living out a fantasy. You know, if college is the best years of all of our lives, like who wouldn't want to? If I had the money to go back and influence my school, like I would love to do that. So I don't judge the people for how it's done. Now, the way I understand the way NC State is run is there's less cooks in the kitchen. They also just have less money. And I think Boo Corrigan is a very pragmatic man, a patient man. And I think you saw that with the way things were operated with Kevin Keats, where he easily, I think, could have fired him maybe the year before they went on the Final Four run. They go on the Final Four run. And then, you know, it's like after that, the next season was a disaster. It's kind of like, well, is he still going to bring him back? I mean, the guy just made the Final Four. But then the decision kind of gets made for you by the way they ended that season, right? Like just being among the worst teams in the entire conference. And I think I look at, you know, the way Bubba Cunningham handled Mac Brown at the end, where it was kind of like they lose to James Madison. Now firing him's really on the table. You lose to Boston College, the decision is essentially made for you. So how Dave Doeren ends this season, I think the decision in some ways can be made for him. If he beats Miami, if he beats UNC, take FSU out of it, I feel like you almost have to bring him back if he wants to come back. Because how much better can you really do, you know, in the hiring process? Like, could you just funnel more money into this, kind of pull a Virginia and be like, all right, well, this is a year where there's a ton of openings in college football, programs that are way higher on the echelon than NC State. So rather than having to buy out a coach and having to pay a new coach a higher salary and then invest in that coach's roster, can we just take some of that money from the donors, we finish strong, and invest it in next year's roster for Dave Doeren, invested in CJ Bailey, invested in a better defense, and then some of these close games that they may have lost or games where the defense let them down, they can win those next year potentially with a 3-year starting quarterback in CJ Bailey. So it's very fickle. And I mean, it really is, like I said, influenced by the quote unquote fans. Like that's, you know, fans can literally pay to have people on the roster. If you got a check for $10K to help get a running back to come, you can do it. That's the world we live in. It's both got a positive side and a downside, but it makes this whole thing a lot of fun.
In a normal offseason, I think maybe you would be more aggressive to say, it's been 13 years. It's been a good run. Let's see what else is out there. But again, we'll see which other openings that there are, Pat. We've gone through that list, a lot of very good schools, a lot of schools with tradition, money, resources, schools that have won national championships that you need to be competing against if you say, let's go get a new coach. So that's something to keep in mind is all the other schools that you'd be competing against. So we'll see how that shakes out. But against Miami, I mean, it's going to be tough up front. Dave Doeren was saying the defensive line for Miami up front is going to be a tough test for this offense. And you talk about a line of scrimmage game, just the talent level that a Miami would have compared to an NC State. Again, there's a reason why this spread's 14.5 points. Again, though, a week ago, I didn't think there was any chance State had against Georgia Tech. And so here we are. I'll eat my words and I'll eat my crow, Pat, in terms of I just didn't see it, having lost 4 out of 5 going into that game. Yeah. I don't know what to expect. I do want to give a shout out to the running back, Duke Scott, filling in for Hollywood Smothers. Definitely. You mentioned the quarterbacks too, though. CJ Bailey playing in his backyard from the Miami area. And then Carson Beck, the Georgia transfer, has played really well at times for the Hurricanes. So Miami split its last 4 games, gone 2-2 in its last 4. So we'll see at home. But NC State has its work cut out for them this weekend.
Yeah, final thing is just like we've been talking about the CJ Bailey, will he stay, will he go? This is his little recruiting trip to Miami, right? Yeah. Like he's going to get a chance to go down there, see how his team stacks up against theirs. I mean, I'm sure conversations might be being had behind the scenes, at least with agents, so this is going to be an interesting test case for that in a lot of ways, like how they finish, how things are going down there. There's a lot of dominoes potentially falling here the next couple weeks.
All right, Pat, we go to Duke needing one win to get to bowl eligibility. The Blue Devils couldn't do it against UConn, but I find this absolutely incredible. Duke still has an opportunity, even at 5-4, a 4-1 conference record, to represent the ACC in the college football playoff. Like, the fact that this is still a possibility is the most ACC thing ever.
I mean, I was going through the tiebreakers in the conference, and Duke, as a 4-loss team, controls their destiny to get into the conference title game.
It's insane.
Which is incredible. And this UConn loss, you look at it on paper and you're like, oh, wow, that must have doomed Duke. It doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter. Now, I will say it kind of matters, because if Duke were to win, now they get in the conference title game and they're there to win it, and they're a 4-loss team, are they going to get into the college football playoff? Because you have to be one of the highest ranked conference champions. So that will be a wild scenario to play out. And here's another one. The 6th tiebreaker, I'll read this verbatim. The representative shall be chosen by a draw as administered by the commissioner or commissioner's designee. Does that mean they're going to pick a name out of the hat?
It's like Friday Night Lights.
Yeah, I haven't seen that show in a few years.
Or like a coin flip, where they do the coin flip. No, they're like the real Friday Night Lights, where it was actually like, if you're going to make the playoffs or not, the high school playoffs. But
I mean, so that's what we're looking at in the ACC. And really what's doomed the ACC this year is, like, people have trouble digesting conferences when there's not an elite team. Like, really what's kept the Big Ten relevant for so long before they expanded was Ohio State was always good. Penn State was always good, and that was your compass. But then when those teams lose, you lose your compass. You lose your sense of, then nobody's good, right? If they're all beating each other, we don't have any team to hang our hat on. We have no measuring stick. And that's what's happened to the ACC this year with Clemson, Florida State, and even Miami to a certain degree. We have lost our North Star for what is good in the ACC. And the reality is, I think that Miami is the most talented team, but they've lost a couple close games. And after that, there's a lot of parity in the conference. Like Virginia, I just think is massively overrated. I think they've won a lot of close games. And I think this gives Duke a real chance to win this game, coupled with the fact that Chandler Morris, their quarterback, got hurt the other week. And you go through Duke's losses, like, yeah, they're a 4-loss team, but they're still competing for the conference title. And it's hard to allow your brain to process those two things at once. But Duke is one of the best teams in the ACC. They just turn the ball over like crazy in all of their losses. And they did it again here versus UConn. And it ended with the turnover from Darian Menson at the end. So, that's your story. Like, this conference is that close. I think they're better than they're being credited for, but they just don't have a team that's separated, and it's hurting the overall perception.
I had to triple check the line, and just saying this out loud, I'm seeing Duke by 5.5 points.
Yeah, that's the quarterback, right? Because I don't think that Morris has practiced up to this point of this recording, and his injuries, like upper body, head, neck. So is it a concussion? Like, it was a hit that he took. And if it is a concussion, you often don't play the next week. So, that might be Vegas telling you the answer to the test there.
Jamari Taylor, the ACC's second leading rusher. That's who the Blue Devils will need to stop out of the backfield. I mean, Pat, you're an AP voter. I mean, I know Miami's the top ranked team right now in the conference. In the CFP rankings, number 15, Georgia Tech's number 16. I mean, Virginia was right there, but Virginia is just coming off a loss this past weekend. So it's just like you're spot on. You're like the North Star. It's like I guess I would pick Miami as the top team in the conference, but people were saying Virginia could potentially be that team before it's lost this last weekend. And I'm just kind of like shoulder shrug where it's like, really? Like, and they've had a nice season. Do not get me wrong. But I'm looking at that like relative to the other teams throughout college football of which team in the ACC could potentially win a game in the CFP. And I'm like, the fact that Duke is still in the running, like I was just like, what world are we in? Because again, Duke is a 4-loss team at this point in the season.
Yeah, you're talking about teams that could win in the college football playoff. To me, it is Miami, it is Georgia Tech, maybe Louisville, and after that, full stop. That's it. Like Virginia has 3 overtime wins. They barely beat UNC. This is a team that's won a lot of close games, and that is a talent. But as we saw with Duke last year, who won a lot of close games, it is subject to regression. It is subject to turnover variation. This is just analytic, common accepted fact in 2025. And when you take their quarterback out of the mix, they're in trouble here down the stretch potentially. Virginia reminds me a lot of the UNC team with Drake May, his first season, that got all the way up really high in the rankings and ended up losing like, what was it, 4 of their last 5, if you include the bowl game, lost to Oregon.
Down the stretch, yeah.
Which was another close loss to a really good Oregon team. So it doesn't mean that UNC team wasn't good. It just means that over the sample size, it presented itself with a lot of close wins in a row and a lot of close losses in a row to end the year. And I think Virginia could be in for that here. And I think, the loss to UConn could be a blessing in disguise because Duke was riding too high.
Hang on.
Well, they lose, it doesn't matter. Now they're going to beat Virginia.
This is the Manny Diaz spin zone.
Yes, failure is data. See, we wanted to lose to UConn because we knew it was a non-conference game. Therefore, we could get our team more focused for the more significant game in Virginia.
College basketball season is underway. Pat, where do you want to start with this? Because we have a few news and notes we should get to before we wrap up here.
Well, I think the story so far is still UNC for a multitude of factors. Because they're the only team that's played somebody and beat somebody, and that's Kansas. And I was at that Kansas game, and I mean, this game was like so significant. Now, it may not play out that way, right? Like Kansas might fall out of the rankings. Darren Peterson might end up being overrated as a prospect. But as it sits today, it's their first win over Kansas since the Matt Doherty era. And it signals a new era for Hubert Davis and UNC basketball, where they have who's likely going to be the best one-and-done player in their history in Caleb Wilson, a guy that, to me, is really echoing or hearkening back to Cooper Flagg in a lot of ways in his personality and the way he affects the game and the way he's rising the tide in Chapel Hill. So you're riding all these highs after it, thinking that, wow, they did it. They nailed it with this roster, with Henry Vasar and Caleb Wilson and the supporting cast they put around those guys. And then you get the email Sunday night, Seth Trimble, broken forearm. And is Seth Trimble their most important piece? No, that's Caleb Wilson, 1. That's probably Henry Vasar, 2. But I'd say Seth Trimble, 3, for his experience, for his defense, and for his versatility. And you lose him for at least a month. And then you find out how they lost him. Like, I just assumed, he broke his forearm in a workout. He must have jumped really high and fell on it. No. A workout machine fell on top of him, Mark. You cannot make this kind of thing up. Absolutely insane. I still can't even believe it. It's just one of those things like, how did this happen? It's a freak accident. Clearly something was probably overlooked with this piece of equipment. But I mean, I was at the game yesterday, Mark, with the Radford game, talking to sources about this, and credit to Field of 68 and Inside Carolina, who've also reported on this. a lat pull down machine falls on him, and his teammates had to help take it off of him. I mean, this is like a terrifying scene. The good news, though, he's okay. He had surgery. He's at the game, goes to class yesterday. I was talking to a source about it. This sounds optimistic to me, but I was told from a source who would know, mid to late December, expected back. So all things considered, you're hoping to get him back for conference play, and it's his left forearm, not his right. So, maybe this is, too, in a weird way, a blessing in disguise where you can get some of these other guys some more minutes and some more confidence. And, again, for Carolina, it's all about how you're judged in March, not here in November, December. But just a crazy swing here in the last few days for the Tar Heels.
A right-handed player and a player with a lot of experience as well, a lot of playing experience, which you need down the stretch when you try to make a run in March. So hopefully he can get back on a court quickly for the Tar Heels. Now, what I would say with Caleb Williams in terms of the impact and just him being a dynamic player and person, the fact that he was like, hey, we're going to white out UNC. And then UNC was like, wait a second, no, we're not. But then they were like, actually, yeah, we will. We will do a whiteout for the game. Who's the last time UNC had a player with that much like cachet to be able to make that happen?
And you don't get any pushback from the coach. There's no Hubert Davis trying to downplay it, which I think would kind of normally be his standpoint. He's feeding into it. He said after that game, after the Kansas game, if this kid ran for student body president, he would win. Hubert Davis is blown away by this, which speaks to the level of talent. I mean, this is a guy in Hubert Davis that comes from the Dean Smith School and is the most old school, one of the most old school modern coaches you're going to see. And he isn't even denying this. So it's fascinating what you're seeing with Wilson, his confidence, his compete level. And that's what these Hubert Davis's teams have lacked. There's been a consistency in just their inconsistency, and as much as I was all in on the Tar Heels after the Kansas game, the Radford game, they come out without Seth Trimble and they look like the old UNC where they're trailing at one point in the first half, 19-16, after former back forward Dennis Parker knocked down a three who had quite the game for Radford. And you're like, man, did I buy in too soon? But I think if you look at the reasons why they struggled a little bit versus Radford, I think you have to give a lot of credit to the Radford coaching staff who tried to first round NCAA tournament this thing. They hacked UNC, I believe, at a historic rate of fouls. By the end of the game, you're looking at the scoreboard to see the foul chart, and everybody on the Radford team had 4 fouls. So they really mucked the game up. They didn't allow Carolina to get into a rhythm, and they didn't. But even still, the game was never really in doubt. And I think the positive takeaway is Luka Bogovats got going. He missed what felt like his first 5 threes. And you're like, gosh, does this kid really deserve the green light? And then you saw what he can do in the second half and what it looks like when the ball goes in. So, that's one of the things you're going to look for because he's the one who started in the absence of Trimble. He's an older guy. This is his first year college basketball, but he's been playing pro overseas. I think he's 22 years old. So that's a really interesting piece. And you saw some other young guards get in the mix. Jaden Young, the transfer from Virginia Tech, Derek Dixon, freshman. So they're going to have to figure out the lineups here. And I as much as it looks like on paper, wow, UNC struggled with Radford. I think if you dig into it, it's maybe not as alarming as it initially would seem.
What I'm looking at, Pat, is when UNC plays NC Central, how do the Tar Heels stack up? And the reason I say that is because NC State blew out NC Central in the opener. So that's kind of look, I'm not saying every game's a little bit different. Styles of play are different, but NC State blew out NC Central. How does UNC fare in the same matchup? So that's kind of what I'm looking at next for UNC. And then obviously when Trimble can get back on the floor. Duke starting out strong in its competition. winning big against Army, big win against Texas as well, the Dickie V Invitational as well in Charlotte. So Duke looks to be off and rolling. Like, to me, I think it's promising, Pat, that Duke is now up to number 4. UNC, after the Kansas win, is now up to number 18. And so we're in for a really exciting season. I think Duke's played really strong, and then we get into some of the stronger non-conference competition for Duke, which they have a very difficult non-conference schedule. We'll have more answers here in the coming weeks as you face some of that stiffer competition in the weeks ahead. Then we'll get to NC State, but that's kind of my thought process with Duke right now, where it's like, stack the wins, take the wins where you can right now, because I don't think Duke is going to run the table in non-conference competition as I pull up their schedule here.
Yeah, I just don't think the gap between these 3 triangle teams is as big as those rankings suggest. Like, I think UNC putting them up to 18 was warranted. I mean, I'm not an AP voter in basketball because that is a challenging job, especially at this time of the year where you got all these tournaments and so many teams to keep track of. I leave that to somebody else, but I would have bumped UNC further up. I think when you got maybe the best freshman in college basketball, a true 7-footer, obviously the uniform alone, I just think UNC is potentially a top 10 team. And I think that NC State, differences with them, I think they're a ranked team as well. I think the problem for them is just they just haven't played anybody yet, and they don't have the brand recognition of Duke and UNC, and it's going to be a little bit because they're going to play VCU coming up in Seton Hall, so at least they're playing some tournament level type competition. But their first real test is going to be at Auburn December 3rd, and then you talk about common opponents. Duke, UNC, and NC State are all going to play Kansas.
Yep.
So we're going to have a common opponent there. And like I said, I wonder how it's going to go with Kansas, because it seems to go one or two ways with them, where they either like fall well below their preseason expectations or fall way above and make the national championship or Final Four. So we're going to find out. I do think Kansas is good. I don't know if they are elite, but that is certainly going to be a fun data point for Triangle Talk going forward.
Yeah, Duke, these are all the ranked teams Duke has in non-conference. Kansas, Arkansas, Florida, Michigan State, and Texas Tech.
Jeez.
All before you get into ACC play, Pat. So it's like, whew. Okay. I've gone to the last 2 NC State games. I'm going to the game tonight. I've noticed, so in the second game against UAB, Pat, Wolfpack didn't shoot the ball well in the first half. That flipped in the second half. But they continue to play hard on defense. They did something coming out of halftime I've never seen a basketball team do before. I'm not saying another team has never done this. They were working on defensive drills. Like normally, hey, we're going to warm up, shoot around, do layup, shoot from distance, do your layup lines. They were working on coming out of halftime on defensive rotations before they got into their layup lines. I've just never seen a team do that. And so even though the shots weren't falling in the first half for the Wolfpack against UAB, they still played hard defensively. And then in the second half, the shots started falling. So another test tonight, UNC Greensboro. But this is a team that's played hard and I think has looked the part under new head coach Will Wade.
This will be my first time getting to see them in person. I'm going to be at the game as well. I'm excited. And it's funny you say that because Will Wade is so many different things rolled up into one. Like he's got that kind of sports movie quality to him where he had the guys do Navy SEAL training in the off season. And he's so charismatic and you could see him being the kind of coach that would make a team literally run, back in my day, we called them suicides. I don't think that's what they call them anymore, but like the type of sprints, hitting the foul line, the half court. Anyone who's played basketball has had to do these. They're brutal. Like you could see him having them do that as a punishment. But then there's that analytic mind that he has as well. And that's where that kind of defensive drill comes into the standpoint. Because I know he was unhappy with the on-ball defense at the end of the game. And yeah, he's not a kind of coach that's going to that's kind of going way back to my criticism of UNC football, Like, just because a win is not a win. That's the thing about that quote. Like, a win is a win. No, it's not. It's data to bring in Manny Diaz into this thing. And just because you won, it's not about the result, about the process. And that's what I like about Will Wade. Even in these games, he's drawing out process, because the red flags in these games will reveal themselves later against tougher competition. So regardless of the score, he's harping on these specific things that he knows they need to do better in his gut and also in his data, because they have run the roster. They have projected a certain level of play that they're going to have. And if they don't match it, they're not going to get to where they want to go. So I think that's an interesting thing that you noticed, and it just kind of speaks to his overall coaching philosophy.
One other thing is he's played his starters deep into the second half, even with a big lead. Now, I think part of that is a lot of them are transfers, and to get them game reps of playing together and then working on conditioning as well, where your starters, your 7-man, your 8-man rotation is going to play deep into the game. But whether it was Quadir Copeland, whether it was Darian Williams, Trey Holloman, I was surprised on how late some of those players played in both against UAB and against NC Central in the opener. It's just after a certain point, it's just like, okay, this game's well in hand. Do you want to get some other players some experience? But again, I think a lot of that is because this team doesn't have really any continuity of playing together is the reason you do that. But that was another thing that stuck out to me through the 2 games that I've seen.
Yeah, I can't wait to see Darian Williams in person, because like I just don't know a ton about him, and I see him on all these lists, and he looked good in the highlights in the different games I've watched. But I want to see it in person, because I've seen Cameron Boozer now. I've seen Caleb Wilson, and there's just things you can't get from the television. Like, one thing I've observed with Caleb Wilson so far is he has this Zion Williamson-like second jump. There are a number of times that he goes up for a layup and maybe misses it, but then is the first one to get his own rebound. And that kind of thing is in a level of explosion that so few people have. So Darian Williams is an interesting one because he's not a freshman. He's an older player. He's an experienced player. And watching him so far on TV, he reminds me a little bit of Paul Pierce, where he's got a little bit of a more old man game, more of a old school small forward game. But I like that. Paul Pierce, I'm from the Boston area, is one of my favorite players of all time. So I'm excited to see that and kind of glean some of the things, because this team, like you said, is so new. And Matt Abel, like a true freshman that's out there. Paul McNeil, what's different about his game this season than it was last? So I'm excited to see it with my own eyes.
Few things here, and then we'll wrap here, I promise. Darian Williams, nice outside touch, and then off the dribble, if you don't double team, he's going to take it to the hoop and score on his man consistently. Knows how to play the game. If the double is drawn, he's able to dump it to another player to get the ball to the open man. And then you mentioned Paul McNeil. What I've noticed is if they can keep him hot from the outside, at 6'6", there aren't going to be a ton of perimeter defenders that can challenge his shot from the outside or to block his shot from the outside. Just get him a little bit of space. He doesn't need much, and he just lets that thing fly. He's a really, really strong shooter. So a holdover from the Keats era. And again, I go back to someone's listening or watching us the very first time. This is a player who scored 71 points in a high school game and broke a state record. So from the outside, I think he's a very, very strong shooter. But there's depth with this team. It's not just those 2 players. I mean, I can mention Holloman. I can mention Copeland, who has experience at McNeese with Will Wade before this season. So there's a lot to like when you talk about this Wolfpack team. And we'll see. It wasn't this week, but we'll see here in the coming weeks if NC State can crack into the top 25.
Yeah, and there's a reason Paul McNeil was basically the only player that Will Wade retained from last year's roster. This guy's an NBA level type talent. And if he can get there, is all about his development and rounding out his complete game offensively and defensively. So, that's a great point to raise there.
He's the one and only Pat Welter. Pat, where are you going to be this weekend?
I'll be at Duke. Yeah, Chris Lee's going to UNC Wake. I'm going to see Duke, Virginia. So yeah, it's going to be exciting. I haven't been to Duke in a while, and they are we said at the beginning of the year, we thought they were going to be the best team in the triangle. They are the best team in the triangle. So taking a break from all this Bill Belichick craziness to actually go see the data, go see the architect of his own demise myself. Go check out Manny Diaz and what he's got for us.
We'll see if the Blue Devils can win and get to bowl eligibility yet again. He's the one and only Pat Welter. I'm Mark Bergin. If you haven't already on the WRAL YouTube page, please hit the like and subscribe button. Let us know what you think in the chat. If you think we're full of it, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
On Apple and Spotify, 5 stars and 5 stars only. Pat, as always, a pleasure.
It's layer season, Mark. I got the vest on. My wife just told me, why am I wearing a vest? Because she left this window open for weeks. Oh, no. It's been open a crack for weeks. You know when you're becoming your parents, when you just immediately go, oh, the energy bill.
Pat, go get that fixed. Go get that fixed now. See you later this week, my friend.
Yeah.